Hello again. Well, tonight I need to keg some beer. So what I'm going to do is have you follow along with me through the process of cleaning my keg. I'm going to take it apart and make sure everything looks good. Then I'm going to sanitize it. And then what I'll do when I sanitize it, I'm going to fill it up with star sand. Then I'm going to push the star sand out of the keg with CO2. And then I'm going to drain my beer from my fermentation bucket into the keg. So follow along, and hopefully we'll come up with some good tips and you'll learn something. Okay, over here in my sink, I've got my keg. Now, it's been sitting in the sink. I have 5 gallons of what was hot water, and then I put a scoop of dollar store OxyClean into it. And it has been sitting now for about 6 hours. So, let off what little pressure there is. And really all I'm going to do now is just pour the keg out into the sink and let it drain. Still a little bit warm. But not much. All right, now this keg was actually already previously cleaned. I'll see if maybe I can, see down there. It's actually pretty clean. I had cleaned it out previously, and I just thought it wouldn't hurt to throw some OxyClean in it and make it clean again. So, with that, I'm going to take it back over to the desk over here and take it apart and see what it looks like, and then I'm going to rinse it out real good. Well, chances are you've seen what I'm going to do here before, so I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. This keg is a pin lock keg, and I don't know if you can see it. Let me bring the camera a little bit closer. Okay, now you'll notice, let's see if I can, on the post there, that one has 2 pins, and this one over here has 3 pins on it. The 2-pin posts are for the gas, and I actually have a gas connector here, and you'll notice gas connectors are gray, and it has 2 pins. Now the gas connectors are gray, and the beer connectors are black. So black for beer, both begin with the B. Gray for gas, both begin with the G. Anyway, same thing holds true with ball lock kegs. And this process is similar to what you do with ball lock kegs. So you can apply this. Now the thing about a pin lock keg is that with the pin lock keg you have to have a special socket. Now this socket has some slots cut out on it that will go over the pins. Now you could use a crescent wrench or some sort of another wrench around the nut on the top, but it's a little bit difficult with the 3-pin one because you can it can be hard to get a good grip on 2 sides, since always on one side or the other there's going to be a pin. So this is a spark plug socket, and I believe it's a 13/16 spark plug socket. And let me bring it up to the camera here. You'll notice that as with standard spark plug sockets, it's got the nut end on it for hooking a wrench up to it. And again, they're the slots. Now I just took a grinder, and this is a 6-wall socket, so I just cut slots right in the center of each wall on both sides. So with my grinder I just found the center of the wall and just ground it down, I know, a good almost 1/2 inch. The walls are still plenty strong enough to do what we need to do. So let me see if I can get this over here. And I'm going to turn it down. Okay, so basically like any other nut you're taking off, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So counterclockwise is loose. And the same thing over here. And the beauty of having all 6 sides notched is that it doesn't matter which way you put it on or on which connector you put it on, the socket fits. Okay, so that comes off. And if you look right around the top, this is the beverage post. And when I put this on before, I did put some Teflon tape on it. And I'm just going to push the tube out and gradually pull it out. And here's what we have. Move this back. This is the beverage tube. This goes to the bottom, right in the middle of the keg. If you look on the top of it, there's an O-ring right there. That O-ring sits on top of this part of the keg right there. Pretty much the same thing holds true with the gas. Top comes up. Now in the case of the gas, in this case it pulled out, it's a whole lot shorter. It doesn't stick down in the keg very much. And it's just a really small one. Now when I just did that, I lost the poppet out of the middle. So I'm going to have to search on the floor here for the poppet, see what happened. That was one of the things I was going to take a look at. I'm going to stop the camera. Got the tubes out. I thought something fell out of that post, but apparently it didn't, because both poppets are in it. But I am going to take a look at them. I looked on the floor, couldn't find anything that fell out. I'm looking at the poppets inside here, and they both look good, and they're both still there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to poke them out, if I can. This one doesn't want to come out very easily. Okay, this is what a poppet looks like. It's just a spring-loaded piston, and on the top of that piston, I'm going to try and get pretty close here. You can see there's a little washer / O-ring that goes around the top of it, and that's what seals the top. Now I'm feeling around here to see if it's torn or got anything out of it, and it's pretty good. So I don't see any reason why I should have to replace this one. I'm going to check the other one here. Okay. Same story, spring loaded, and it's got a little black O-ring around the top of it. These are pretty universal. You can pick them up at any homebrew store. They may have 2 or 3 different styles, so if you do want to replace them, make sure you take your post with you and try them out before you leave. And put this back in. Now one thing, these will sit, when you screw the post back onto the keg, it'll push them down nice and snug. The post will hold them in place. This one, I'm not sure it's going in good. Alright, that looks good. Okay, with that, the next thing I want to do is replace the O-ring that goes around the top of it. I'm going to stop for a second and get a little screwdriver that I can pry this one off with. Got the little screwdriver here, and I'm just going to get behind the O-ring and pop it off. Now, actually, this O-ring is in pretty good shape. It hasn't been that long since I rebuilt this keg. So I'm going to compare this O-ring with the new one, which I have a bag full here. Pin lock O-rings. And it sure can't hurt to change it. They aren't all that expensive. You can even buy the little sets of them at your local home improvement store. Although you want to make darn sure that's the right one, because sometimes they're a little smaller in diameter And actually that one was a little smaller in diameter. So I'm going to replace this. Okay. Especially on the gas, you can have problems with it leaking. I lost a keg full of beer once when the side for the beverage leaked under pressure, and I've lost tanks of gas when the gas sides leaked under pressure. So you want to make sure you have the right size O-ring. So compare what you got. Make sure you buy pin lock O-rings if you have a pin lock setup, and ball lock O-rings if you use a ball lock. Okay, bam. Oh, I just poked a hole in that O-ring, so that's no good. Okay, replace that one. And there you go. Other thing I want to replace is the O-rings around the posts. They seal this and the post to the top of the keg. So I do have some of those here. And I will go ahead and replace them. Now this one's a little bit tricky because it's such a long post. So what I'm going to do is use a little bit of lube on it. And I'm just going to, this is plumber's faucet grease. I use it for keg lube. And with that, should just slide right up. Now one thing I did do, I have a little brush here, about a 3-foot brush, and it goes down the inside of my tube really nicely. So after I pulled it out of the keg, I went over to my sink and I ran the brush through the tube and rinsed it out and got any gunk that might have been on the inside of that. Did the same thing with the gas tube too. So, lube on it. Okay, so we're good to go. So right now, I'm going to rinse out the inside of the keg. Now, I don't know if I showed these kegs to you before. I got this keg, I traded it with the guy. And before it looked nice and red and shiny and black on the bottom and top, it looked like this. A little bit of a difference there. The red one I spray painted. This one I haven't gotten around to spray painting yet, but basically all I did was I masked off all the stainless steel, masked off the fittings on the top and the hole with masking tape, and then I cut around the center here and again mask the bottom. A little bit of spray paint, and these things look damn near brand new compared to this one that looks pretty old. Nothing special about that spray paint, it was just standard spray paint. Okay, so I'm going to go rinse this out. I'll be back. Well, the keg's all rinsed out, ready to go. Time to put the posts back on. Now, before I put posts on, I do like to put a little bit of Teflon tape around the threads of them. Probably not absolutely necessary because you got an O-ring that's going to seal it shut, but I like Teflon tape on everything. This is a little bit tricky because there's not a whole lot of room to work, so I cut off about a 3-inch strip and get it started, and then just work my way around. Okay. Okay. There's one. Do the same thing to the other side. Okay, that's one that'll help. Now, as I said before, you got your two different posts, 3-pin and 2-pin. 2-pin is gas, 3-pin is beer. Again, your connectors will be black for beer, gray for gas. First thing I'm going to do is put my beer line in. Let that go in. And that goes to the bottom. And that's right on the bottom of the keg. And beverage has 3. I'll get that started. Okay, now put my little gas nub in there. And that sticks down into the keg maybe about a ½ inch. And screw the gas post on. Okay, now I'm going to just tighten them up. Now you want to tighten them snug. You don't want them so tight that you crush the O-ring, and you don't want them loose so they leak. You want them nice and snug. Okay. Don't over torque them. Now I'm going to go ahead and test the poppets, make sure they work okay. Okay, this thing's ready for beer. Alright, well there's the keg. I'm going to pour 5 gallons of sanitizer in it. Alright, this bucket here has got about 2.5 gallons. Now, sanitizer lasts for a while. If you have some pH strips or a pH meter, check it. As long as the pH is under, I understand, 3.2, it's good enough to continue sanitizing, and sanitizer lasts quite a while. I've also got a couple bottles filled with sanitizer, so I'll start pouring some of them in. I do want to fill this all the way up with liquid, so if foam goes over the outside, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'll continue doing this and come back. Well, it's totally filled with sanitizer. If you look, almost to the top here, which is perfect. Gonna just burp my fittings here. What I will do now is I'm going to burp this keg just like you would after you put beer in it. So, put my top on. And that nice and snug. Oops. This up. And make sure I get some. Okay, so I'm going to put my gas on it. Now, I kind of did a experiment once and figured out that you got to burp a keg somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 or 15 times. Alright, I think that's pretty good. I doubt there's much oxygen left in there. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to
Take this down a bunch. And I'm going to turn this very low because I just want to barely push the... Okay. Alright. Now, I'm just going to push that CO2 into the keg and push the liquid out of the keg and back into my bucket. So, all I got to do is find a picnic tap somewhere. Well, I'm ready to go. What I got is a beverage connector, beer connector, hooked onto a hose. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the sanitizer out of the keg and into my sanitizer bucket. All I got to do is push it down and it'll start flowing. And if you look, you can see it going in there. While I'm at that, I'm going to... Now, this hose here I'm going to actually reuse. I will put that on the spigot of my fermenter, and the fermented beer is going to go into the keg through the same hose that right now I've got stuff coming out of. Now, I'm going to go ahead and fill up my sanitizer bottles because, like I said, this stuff lasts forever as long as the pH is in good condition. And I'm going to go ahead and continue to use it. And this is the only thing I use these bottles for, is just to store the sanitizer. Now you might think this uses a lot of CO2, but really it doesn't use that much because it's not being forced into the sanitizer as if it was being carbonated. So it does not really use that much. And I thought I turned the pressure down pretty good. And that's that. So I will let that go until we start getting some CO2 bubbles coming out, and we'll know I'm done. It shouldn't be long now. If you watch the hose here, it should start coming out really bubbly, and we'll see some air going through. And I bet about 10 seconds. Oh, it's starting to loosen up a little bit now. And I give it another 4 or 5 seconds here, and we're going to have straight gas coming out. You'll be able to tell because you'll hear it bubbling. And there we go. So with that, pull the gas off. Put my tank in. And it's going to let the pressure off. So now I have a completely sanitized, fully purged keg ready for beer. I got a sanitized line, and really all I got to do is push the beer out of my fermenter bucket, and we'll be in good shape. So with that said, let's look over at the fermenter bucket, which is sitting right there. Next step in this process is to start working with it. Now I'm going to open up the vent on the top here because as liquid gets drained down into there, it's going to vent out. I have a bucket of sanitizer, or spray bottle of sanitizer. Now I just take this on here, open this up, pull the airlock, and start draining. Now one other thing that CO2 purged out the liquid line there. So now it's just a matter of letting the fermenter drain. And I'll have beer ready to go. Now, I do have about 5.5 gallons in this fermenter, so I might end up with some extra beer that I'll go put straight into bottles. So while this is doing that, I'm going to turn the camera off, and we'll be getting back in a minute. Okay, as this is filling, there's one interesting phenomenon I wanted to kind of show you. It's kind of humid out right now, and as this is coming up, I can actually see a condensation line in the keg that tells me how full it is. I'll see if I can get a little closer. It's kind of hard to see from that angle. Let's see. It's actually right about here. It goes from hot to cold, and there's a line right there. Probably see it better in person, but almost done. That's almost done. Looks like this is getting down to my dry hop bag. Probably should have pulled that. Might get in the way. Alright, well, looking at the condensation ring, and about right here. So, I'd say maybe another 30 seconds or so, and that should be full, and hopefully start coming out of here, I'm assuming. Now, this is about the most, oxygen-free way I know of transferring beer to your keg. You can, of course, still burp the keg when it's done. It is going through the beverage line, which means it's filling from the bottom up. So it's not, I guess it's not disturbing the beer that much. This is an amber, by the way. And it tasted pretty good the last time I tasted it. But I'm hoping I'm just about done. The inside of the bucket's pretty empty. Oh, there we go. That's all it wrote. She's done. So there you have it. Pull this off. Just gonna hang it up here for now. Shut this thing off. Now there is, looks like there's probably 3 or 4 bottles left in here. It's above the fitting. So I will probably fill a couple bottles, and then I haven't primed this, so I'll probably have to add some sugar directly to the bottles. But that's what we have. I decided that I wanted some beer in bottles. So what I've done, since I've just got the beer in the keg, and there's no carbonation in it, the keg was fully purged, all CO2. I don't have anything primed, so I'm just going to fill up some beer bottles off of a picnic tap with the beer at a really low pressure coming out. And in fact, that's non-existent pressure coming out. Mainly because I shut the tank off. And this is a whole lot easier than a beer gun because I don't really have to worry about it foaming over because it's not carbonated. Now, since it isn't primed, I am going to have to add some sugar to these bottles, which is not the most accurate way to carbonate, but that's okay. It'll work. These are strictly for my consumption. If I want to do any for a contest of some sort, I will do that. And I've washed and sanitized these bottles, so it's just a matter of filling them. I think I'm going to fill about a dozen. And call it a night. You can see the foam from the sanitizer coming out of the bottle. And there's another one. And this one needs a little more in it. I actually knocked that bottle over, so I need to refill it. Okay, another one. Now once I'm done with this, I will put the gas on the keg to carbonate it. I'm not going to carbonate it very fast. I'll just set it at about 12 to 15 pounds of pressure for a couple days, then dial it back to about 10. And that should give me decent carbonation. If I need more, I'll add some pressure. But this works pretty good. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Okay, well, I kind of got a bit carried away when I was bottling. I ended up bottling 24 bottles from the keg. So now I'm going to have to go about putting priming sugar in those bottles. Let me swing over here and show you what we got. Okay, I hope I don't get dizzy. Okay, so I got 24 bottles there and I got a funnel. I don't have any carbonation drops. So I'm going to do this using a funnel and measuring spoon. Now I've looked online and actually found a Mr. Beer thing that said for a 12-ounce bottle you should use 3/4 of a teaspoon of sugar. So I've got a 1/2 teaspoon and a 1/4 teaspoon here. So I'm just going to real carefully add sugar to each of these. Now I'm just using standard granulated sugar, probably beet sugar, I don't know. And this should give me a moderate level of carbonation. And I'm just going to work my way through each one of these and do it. Anyway, I'm not going to have you follow along with me, but that's what I'm going to do. Then what I'll do is I'll take some CO2 and I'll purge the headspace of all the bottles right before I cap it. Well, there you have it. I went through the process of cleaning up and rebuilding the seals in the keg. One thing I didn't show is that I did replace the O-ring on the lid. That came in the kit. I transferred, well, first thing I did is I put Star San in the keg and pushed the Star San out with CO2. That purged the keg nicely, so I didn't have any oxygen in it at all. Then I transferred
fermented beer from my fermenter into the keg through the beverage connector, so it filled from the bottom up, and I left the pressure release valve open so the CO2 would come out. If you had a pin lock keg without a pressure release valve, you could just put a gas fitting on it, just a standard gas connector, and without a hose on it, and it would have done the same thing. It would have let the CO2 out the gas port. Then when I was done, since I had about a gallon of beer left in the fermenter, I went ahead and bottled it. And then I got a little carried away and wanted to make some more bottles to have and share. So I ended up bottling a full case of beer, 24 bottles. I primed the beer with table sugar. I put 3/4 of a teaspoon in each bottle. I just took a funnel and filled each bottle with a 1/4 teaspoon first, and then went back and added a 1/2 teaspoon. I purged the top of the headspace of each bottle with some CO2 from my tank, and just took the hose and went to each bottle for a second or two and pushed out the air that was in it. And when I was done, I capped it. So it's been kind of a busy night. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope you learned some tips and tricks. Leave me some comments. I'm sure somebody's probably going to comment about using table sugar and not being nearly as accurate as priming in a bucket with the full volume. Totally agree. I can't argue with that. But this is a way you can get around that. Maybe from bottle to bottle I might have some differences in carbonation. But it's going to be close enough to where it's not really going to be noticeable. The 3/4 of a teaspoon will give me a moderate carbonation level, so I shouldn't have any problem. I've done it before, it works. But typically, if I was going to be bottling completely, I'd go ahead and prime the full volume and put the beer in the bottles after priming. I have even primed the keg and before I filled it through some priming sugar in the hose, and before I started transferring the beer. Well, already boiled and sanitized, of course. Then I've done that. That works. Kind of a hassle. And then when you put the beer in the keg, it's really over primed for a keg. A keg uses a lot less sugar to prime it with sugar than does a bottle or a batch of 5 gallons or 3 gallons or however many gallons you use. Another method I could have done is I could have just put some priming sugar in the bucket and then let a gallon of beer out of the keg until it got up to the gallon mark in the bucket. That would have worked. Would have been probably as easy or close, but I did kind of like filling the bottles from the keg with the CO2 pressure behind it. It made it go a lot faster and, I don't know, seemed just as accurate. So leave me some comments. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my new YouTube channel, YouTube/Tim Trayvold. And cheers. Enjoy. Happy brewing.